I would like to welcome the audience to the November 15th, 2022 Parish Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Would you all please stand while Mr. LaSalle Williams says the invocation and pledge of allegiance?
Dear Lord, again, we come thanking you for another blessed day. Thank you for life, for health, and strength. Thank you for those who suffer throughout the month of Thanksgiving, and we just thank you. Thank you for this board. Thank you for this staff. Thank you for those who come seeking our help tonight. Let the Holy Spirit guide
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Christie, would you please call the roll?
Chair Kirk Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Julia Dickerson,
Present.
Ms. Latricia Cobb, Mr. Rock, Mr. Carl Vincent are out, absent. Ms. Sharon Galicia. Here. Ms. Janelle Hyatt, Mr. Art Little,
Here.
Mr. Jake Porche,
Here.
Mr. LaSalle Williams,
Here.
and Ms. Deanne Laney. Here.
This is an 11-member board. It will take a majority of those members present to grant or deny any request heard tonight. The chair will refrain from voting unless that vote might affect the outcome. The meeting will be conducted with me reading the request from the agenda. The planning staff will give a presentation and report their recommendations. If the applicant would like to add to the staff's presentation, or if someone from the audience has comments, please come to the microphone and state your name, address, and the nature of your request. All persons wishing to speak other than the applicants need to fill out a blue Request to Appear form located in the back of this room. The form must be given to a staff member prior to the reading of the agenda item. As required by this board's bylaws, in all cases, the proponents will be limited to 10 minutes. Opponents will be granted 10 minutes as well, with each speaker allowed no more than 3 minutes. I recommend that a spokesperson be selected if there is a large group wanting to speak on the same agenda item. If 4 more speaker request forms are submitted, the time allowed for individual speakers will be limited based upon the number of forms submitted. The chair has the right to limit speakers who present redundant information or personal attacks. In unique situations, the chair may extend or the board may vote to extend the time allotted for speakers. After discussion, the board will vote on each request. I will announce the decision of the board after the vote. The exception and variances are final tonight. The amendments to Chapter 26 will go before the police jury for final action on Thursday, December 1st, 2022. This meeting is being filmed by the Calcasieu Parish Government Channel and can be viewed on Wednesday and Thursday following the meeting. For additional run dates, check the website at www.calcasieuParish.gov. Channel 5 in Lake Charles, Sulphur, Moss Bluff, Westlake, Vinton, DeQuincy, and Gillis. Channel 99 in Carlos and Grand Lake. Please either turn off or silence all electronic devices. Take appropriate action to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the October 18th, 2022 Planning and Zoning meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Ms. Dickerson, second by Mr. Little. Minutes are approved. Variances. Item 6A, take appropriate action on the following application. 3439 Luke Powers Road in Ward 3. Variance to allow a second dwelling with less than required public footage, road frontage, required 200 feet, requesting 169.52 feet, and with less than required lot square footage, required 87,120 square feet, requesting 54,450 square feet. Applicant Dido Noel Marina. This is variance VAR-1022-0217 I will entertain a motion for approval with the conditions.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Little, second by Ms. Hyatt. Ms. Tunn.
Property is located on Luke Powers Road in northeast Lake Charles. On the property is the applicant's home and recently placed 14 by 80 manufactured home that will be utilized by the applicant's mother. Because minimal impacts are to be expected, the staff recommends the request be granted with the following conditions. That the development adhere to the site plan on file with the Division of Planning and Development, provided that the director or designee may authorize adjustments to the site plan in light of technical or engineering considerations discovered during development. 2, that the manufactured home be skirted prior to the utilities being connected. And 3, that all development permits must be obtained within 30 days of planning and zoning approval.
Thank you, Ms. Tunn. Does the applicant have anything to add to this presentation? Okay. Any comments or questions by the board? There being none, all those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, motion carries. Item 6B, take appropriate action on the following application. 7690 and 7696 Nine Oaks Drive in Ward 3. Variance to decrease the side yard setback requirement on 2 lots required 5 feet, requesting 2 feet. Applicant R.E. Washington Construction, LLC. This is item VAR-1022-0219. I will entertain a motion for approval with the conditions. Motion by Ms. Galicia, second by Ms. Hyatt. Ms. Tunn.
Property is in South Lake Charles, located within the Nine Oaks subdivision off East Tame Farm Road on Nine Oaks Drive. The applicant recently constructed 2 homes within the subdivision. The newly constructed homes have a 2-foot side yard setback and does not meet the 5-foot requirement. The applicant is requesting a variance to decrease the side yard setback to move forward with the project. Because minimal impacts are to be expected, the staff recommends the request be granted with the following conditions. That the development adhere to the site plan on file, the Division of Planning and Development, provided that the director or designee may authorize adjustments to the site plan in light of technical or engineering considerations discovered during development, and that a development permit must be obtained within 30 days of planning and zoning approval.
Thank you, Ms. Tunn. Does the applicant have anything to add to this presentation? Any questions or items of discussion by the board members? All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, motion carries. Item 6C, take appropriate action on the following application, 4375 Navajo Trail in Ward 5, variance to allow a second dwelling with less than required public road frontage, required 200 feet, requesting 180.93 feet, and with less than required lot square footage, required 87,120 square feet, requesting 63,597 square feet. The applicant is Jill Broussard. This is variance case VAR-1122-0221. I will entertain a motion for approval with the conditions. Motion by Ms. Dickerson, second by Ms. Hyatt. Ms. Tunn.
Property is located between Sulphur and Starks on Navajo Trail and encompasses approximately 1.46 acres. This tract is part of the Charlie Bros subdivision that was developed in 2014. The applicant recently signed a lease to purchase agreement with an existing manufactured home on the property. Currently, the applicant is requesting to allow a second manufactured home on the 1.46 acre tract. Because minimal impacts are to be expected, the staff recommends the request be granted with the following conditions. That the development adhere to the site plan on file with the Division of Planning and Development, provided that the director or designee may authorize adjustments to the site plan in light of technical or engineering considerations discovered during development, and that the manufactured home be skirted prior to the utilities being connected.
Thank you, Ms. Tunn. Does the applicant have anything to add to this presentation? If present. Any questions by the board or concerns? There being none, all those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, motion carries. Exceptions, item 7. Item 7A, take appropriate action on the following application, 271 High Hope Road in Ward 6, an exception to allow residential development, a manufactured home. Applicant is Carter Qualls. This is exception case EX-1022-0156. I will entertain a motion for approval with the conditions. Motion by Mr. Williams, second by Ms. Hyatt. Ms. Hood.
Property is located north of Sulphur and encompasses 2.2 acres of single-family residential zone land. The applicant would like to place a 16 by 72 manufactured home on the property to serve as a temporary residence until he is able to construct a new home. The parish code requires an exception by the board for the manufactured home to be placed in the single-family residential zoning district. Because minimal impacts are to be expected, the staff recommends that the request be granted with the following conditions: that the development adhere to the site plan on file with the Division of Planning and Development, provided that the director or designee may authorize adjustments to the site plan in light of technical or engineering considerations discovered during development, that the manufactured home be skirted prior to utilities being connected, and that the placement of the manufactured home is for 2 years or upon completion of the new dwelling, whichever comes first.
Thank you, Ms. Tug. Does the applicant have anything to add to this item on our agenda? Does any of the board members have comment, question for this agenda item? There being none, all those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, motion carries. Item 8, proposed amendments to Chapter 26. 8A, take appropriate action on a request by the Calcasieu Parish Division of Planning and Development on proposed amendments to Chapter 26 of the Calcasieu Parish Code of Ordinances, specifically to adopt the Solar Energy Facilities Ordinance. I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of the proposed amendments. Motion by Mr. Williams, second by Ms. Hyatt. Mr. Crane?
Yeah, yes, so Mr. Chairman, before you open it up to public comment, I just let you know that, you know, in the October meeting, we did our presentation to y'all regarding this solar facility ordinance. And since then, it's been, you know, out on public notice, and we put it on our website, social media, and we have received several comments. Well, Mr. Little asked some questions to us, and we answered those questions hopefully well enough. And we've had some other comments from other, actually a North Carolina solar company, and I think they have a representative here tonight. So anyway, yeah, so we appreciate y'all taking this under consideration, and I'll yield the floor so y'all can listen to any public comments.
Any items discussed by the board before we entertain our first blue card?
I have a few comments.
Mr. Bourget?
Would we prefer to hear from the
Okay.
public first? And
Okay.
that way I can address any of their concerns as well.
We have one blue card. Tyler Karen?
3 minutes, all right. Been told I have 3 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep this really quickly. First of all, board, thank you so much for meeting tonight. I've got minutes on my phone, so please ignore the device over here. My name's Tyler Karen. I represent Carolina Solar Energy, a solar energy development firm out of Durham, North Carolina. We've been developing projects since about 2004 in North Carolina, Virginia, and Kentucky, and we've recently sent our sites on the Gulf Coast, coming and looking at projects and prospecting for projects in Calcasieu Parish. I'm here tonight to talk about some of the 3 projects that we have in Calcasieu Parish that we're currently working on. In total, it's going to be over $1 billion in capital investment, assuming these projects do make it to their full term. First of all, I would just want to thank Director Crane and the planning and zoning staff for the tremendous job in the ordinance they put together. We've helped put very many counties in North Carolina ordinances for solar specifically in place, and you all have done an immaculate job in putting together an ordinance, so thank you so much for your hard work in all of that. We do have a couple of comments, though, just a few. The first one being that our suggestion for a change be in section 2699 C7D. What our change proposes is to allow for panels, inverters, and transformers to be installed if and only if they are installed at least 1 foot above base flood elevation. This is currently happening with a bunch of other projects that are in operation, in construction, and are being insured throughout the country right now. And we think it can be done very safely, and we think it should be done in Calcasieu Parish. Part of the reason for this is there are numerous substations and transmission lines which the solar projects need to connect to that exist in 100-year floodplains in Calcasieu Parish. As the text currently stands, there are projects that will be unable to interconnect to these transmission facilities unless a change is to be made. Second ask for us is for the landscaping buffer to have a built-in exception or waiver into the ordinance. Director Crane has done an amazing job in putting together the landscaping buffer. We don't want to touch that. It's going to look gorgeous. But we'd love for there to be a built-in exception into the ordinance for us to talk with landowners adjacent to the projects to see if we can get a waiver to exempt them, whether they be agricultural, whether they be tree farms, from us installing a buffer adjacent to the facility in their land. The last ask, a little simpler. We do ask that the permitted exemption for solar farms also include commercial districts. We've noticed in looking around the county, there are a ton of parcels that are both agricultural and commercial zoned. And we hope that by making that change, you're able to cut out a step in terms of rezoning for both your work and for ours. Thank you very much for the comment period today.
Thank you. Mr. Porcher, you have a statement?
Oh, not really a statement or an address. No one get nervous. I had, looking through, my limited experience was the Sweet Lake proposal that came before us that we approved. I basically have, I guess, 3 comments or really 2 concerns. The one in Sweet Lake was the panel at max height, according to my memory, y'all could correct me, was 10 feet. It was like 3 feet of bollards, and then the panel was 7 foot at max height. That was 10 feet. And I just looking through here, this current standard, the maximum height is 25 feet. And so, also reading the screening, taking 4 to 5 years for the screening to 25 feet would take a long time to grow some trees. So I guess my question was, that's considerably higher. And one of my selling points to me, or something that made me feel comfortable about the Sweet Lake, was the fact that it would be 10 feet. It's a lot easier to hide something 10 foot than 25. So I would feel comfortable with a 10-foot standard that we've already been proposed, and that's what they asked us for, was 10 feet. And then if there was an exception, they could come to us or to the staff and say, hey, we're trying to design this thing, we're at 12 feet, can we get an exception? The sound was a good example of a very objective measurement, 60 decibels at a certain distance. There's not much to argue about there. The lighting, however, let me find my notes. On lighting, it's they've got the motion censored. Lighting shall be directed inward, downward, reasonably shielded, which to me is very subjective. There are some current standards that are more objective. One thing that I see a lot just in one of the industries that we're in is dark sky compliant. There are actual lighting fixtures that meet that standard. That's a national or maybe even global standard, the dark sky compliant. That gives a more subjective standard to lights. You can imagine in a rural area, during the day, no, you don't see it. At night, all of a sudden, the North Stars or, the great northern lights are glowing in the dark. So that was the other And the underground utilities, the Sweet Lake, minus the main transmission lines, all the utilities were underground. The wording there was, let me find it, 13. Reasonable efforts shall be made to place utility connections from the solar energy facility installation underground. And I was just thinking reasonable efforts instead of a mandated, and then asking, again, for an exception if there's certain design criteria that's cumbersome or cost prohibitive to do underground. Another advantage of that was, God forbid, during a hurricane, to me, just in my, it would be less potential damage for, all these overhead lines versus all underground. And the Sweet Lake, according to my memory, was all underground utilities minus the main transmission. So that was, and I did, talk to a few folks and get some opinions along with reading through it, but I guess I did it in order of my concerns. The 25-foot maximum height, I feel like it's really tall. So that was my 3 comments to discuss.
Craig?
The 25-foot, to be honest, I'm not sure where we got that from.
Okay.
I know we researched a lot of different ordinances across the country.
Sure.
That may have been a standard that we gave just to give some flexibility.
Sure.
However, if you want to reduce that, that's an option there. And like you said, it doesn't prohibit a company from coming back in and
That's right.
requesting a variance
Yeah.
on anything, any of the development standards.
Right.
That's just the way our ordinance is set up.
Right.
So that's a possibility
Okay.
if that's something
I would-
that wants to be,
I
that you'd
would-
like to do.
If engineers eventually grab this and they start designing,
Sure.
if there's a 25-foot height, they start designing, like,
Yeah.
oh, we got, this, versus 10, I think the intent would be to keep it as
And it could
low as
be,
possible.
I mean, it could be that, some of those heights are relative to areas that have more undulation in the topography, and so
Right.
you're raising you're raising them up to get to the sunlight a little
from a
bit better.
benchmark elevation.
Correct.
Yep.
That's right. Where in
We're
our
flat.
geography here, we're pretty flat.
Yeah.
So, that could be reasonable.
And the lighting, just some sort of a more objective measurement to
Yeah.
be able to control it at night. And they're going to be in the middle of rural areas, which
Yeah,
typically gets dark.
And that was really, and if you read in here where we say where reasonable, in the A1 zoning district, lighting shall incorporate full cutoff fixtures to reduce light
Yeah.
pollution. And that was the intent there. If it's gonna be in a rural agriculture area,
Right.
you need to put the full cutoff shields around that lighting so that it doesn't escape to other properties. We want it to keep it so it's not lit up.
That's right.
You
Yeah,
know,
glowing.
that, however, if you notice in the ordinance, you are allowed to have these in industrial areas.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're not that concerned about, because if you look across the river here
Right.
to our industrial areas, it's lit up.
That's true.
So that's why we put that in there.
As
We
it's-
want
My
to,
limited experience was in agricultural area with the Sweet Lake, so
That's
has
right.
been in my thought process the whole time I'm reading through it.
that's right. So, yeah, we definitely want to keep the lighting limited in those A1 areas. However, they do have to have safety, and we know that. But it can be shielded. It can be directed down. So
Right.
that's why we put that in
That dark
there.
sky compliant is maybe something we could look into.
We could look at
That's not only design, but it's actual lighting fixtures that meet that standard
That's correct.
for not light pollution.
Yeah.
And
what
underground
was-
utilities, yeah.
That's something that certainly can be required.
Right.
I don't think we're married to it either way. I mean, that's something if you want to do that.
That's it. How do we do that? Here tonight?
I have a suggestion for on that one. First off, anybody else want to make comments, or is that it for now?
They have people holding blue cards. The rules state you have to provide that blue card prior to reading the agenda item.
So,
Unless the board wants to hear the comments. I'll entertain a motion if you want to hear these.
I'll hear it.
I'd like to hear it.
Okay. Motion made by Ms. Winey,
Second.
second by Mr. Porsche. Chris Cothran?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you making the exception to the rules tonight and allowing me to speak. My name is Christopher Cothran. I represent NextEra Energy Resources. We're a large developer of renewable energy projects across the Southeast, and we actually have operating assets in 38 states in the United States.
Address for the record?
Address is 700 Universe Boulevard in Juno Beach, Florida.
Thank you, sir.
The comments that I would make, one's regarding the wetlands. For the previous speaker, we would agree with the recommendation that they made that if assets should be allowed to be within a 100-year floodplain, if proper engineering is taken into account for elevating that resource or that asset that could be impacted by the 100-year flood. Adding to 2699 C7B, specifically regarding wetlands, and making sure that the language states specifically that the project will follow and abide by any wetlands regulations or permitting that's required by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality as required, would be recommended by NextEra. For the landscape buffer, we would recommend that it should be, rather than from just the property line, it should be from the limits of disturbance or the project boundary. That we believe is something that should be considered in regards to the landscape buffer, especially in Calcasieu Parish. You've got an honest mix of open row crop field areas as well as some timbered properties, making sure that the buffer accounts for what the previous use was and allows for you to leverage any of the existing timber tracts that are there to better provide for that veg buffer. Having a rule, a fast and hard rule regarding vegetation and where that stops and starts. If you start that on the property line, that might be a little bit too constrictive compared to what you're trying to achieve, and make sure that the visual impact of the surrounding properties aren't impacted as greatly. That was 2699 C11A regarding the landscape buffer. And then the landscape buffer requirements by zoning district were somewhat variant to one another, and we would recommend that the commission take a hard look at that and make sure that there's proper uniformity as to what the commission wants to see for the constituents in regards to the variation between veg buffer from one to the other. The other one too that was highlighted by my team and myself is the decommissioning rules. There are decommissioning rules that are being considered currently by the Department of Natural Resources here in the state. The industry is working heavily with them to address those, so keep an eye on that.
Thank you, Mr. Cothran.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate your time. Stephanie? I don't want to butcher it. I'm going to say either Mordeles or Mordles.
Morales.
Mordles?
Yes. And the address for the record is the same, 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida. First, I'd like to say
Oh, that's why. It looks like a D. Never mind.
thank you so much for everyone's time and for granting this exception for me to speak with you all today. After reviewing the ordinance, and for context, I work on Christopher Cothran's team. I'm a solar developer here in Louisiana. A few things that I also wanted to highlight and bring to your attention. The first of which is Section C11B regarding the maintenance of the vegetative buffer. The ordinance discusses different the rules for vegetation maintenance around the solar property. We recommend that the vegetative buffer requirement should only be for the first year post-installation of the construction of the project. 1 year of maintenance really allows the vegetation to set in and create a natural ecosystem, and is something that we can provide to y'all with a landscape plan in our design or anybody else's design of their project, so that you can see not only what the vegetation is, but the projected growth and ecosystem that would be created. The second item I'd like to bring to the attention is Section D, Part 1, Roman numeral 6, I believe, regarding the wildlife. It is our recommendation that there be clarity around the language restricting wildlife from within the 2-mile radius of the site to impact only the project boundary. The next item would be Section D1K regarding the glint and glare. The ordinance doesn't clearly lay out if it's required or not, and we recommend that the glint and glare study should only be required if the site or project boundary meets the conditions of being in close proximity to an airport, flight path, etc. In continuation, the next item we would like to provide a recommendation for is Section D1, Section I, under the Community Impact Assessment, specifically around the economic impact report that is requested as part of the ordinance. We would like to recommend that applicants submit an economic impact study detailing some of the items outlined in your ordinance, but I guess let the applicant tailor the contents of that study so as not to provide non-public or proprietary information that could or is not already out there in the public. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Morales.
Mr. Brown, hold on 1 second, if you can wait. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Mr. Porche, before, I don't think any of the speakers touched on Mr. Porche's concern about 25 versus 10 feet. If you'd like to ask a question about that, you might get another opinion to consider.
Were you able to hear Mr. Gadd? Do you have any comments with your experience on the maximum height of the panels? We were, earlier in the year, a request was brought to us with design standards of the 10 feet maximum height with the panel fully extended. Our ordinance currently is worded, or the ordinance under consideration, at 25 feet maximum height. In your experience, do you know where y'all's maximum height typically? This gentleman's coming.
Yeah.
Either one. I would love to hear y'all's opinion on the maximum height.
Pretty sure it's under 25 feet.
Yeah.
Chris has the answer.
Yeah.
Under 25 feet would not surprise me at all. Now, I will say, keeping it in a range that's north of 10 is probably wise because the technologies are changing. Panels are getting larger. You're concentrating more power production out of that solar panel as the technology evolves. That said, the dimensions of the panel can change. So the racking may be a certain height out of the ground. That's the steel that's posted in the ground, and then the rack that it's mounted to. When it hits a maximum angle, if it's a tracking, when it hits the maximum, the top of that back panel, right now we're seeing range from 10 feet up to 16, no more than 20 feet. 25 does sound a little high, but you also want to make sure that the ordinance is allowed for technology advancement over the coming years.
And that's where, you know, my point was, they could still, with the request, ask for an exception to our standard of whatever maximum height we set. And I would rather take that approach than a 25-foot maximum height.
The other item that you mentioned earlier, just to talk on, you mentioned undergrounding the utilities
Right.
and everything. You know, we're a utility in Florida. We're very familiar with hardening against hurricane and hurricane force storms. There are ways to harden those utilities on site without having to go underground. Some landowners may actually elect to have us go above ground because they don't want their land ripped apart
Okay.
Upon
Good point.
decommissioning.
That could be, that's a good point because of the decommissioning at the
Yes.
end of the project.
Very
too.
good point.
And just to add to that, we have seen in other areas where we develop that the parish or the planning and zoning may require an emergency response type of language that we can, you know, present or make available should a hurricane happen. You know, these are the steps that we would take or that we could think about moving forward in order to get things back up and running and make sure that everything is done safely and efficiently. And, you know, that is something that you guys could maybe think about either incorporating or offering as an alternative to
The
underground.
developer submit some sort of hurricane mitigation plan?
We are, and I think what she's trying to allude to as well is we're an affiliate of Florida Power and Light Company, and we're the largest rate-regulated utility in the state of Florida. We're the ones that, we're the Entergy of the state of Florida.
Okay, gotcha.
And so we actually provide a lot of mutual aid here in the state of Louisiana when a storm comes knocking and vice versa. When we just got, I saw Entergy trucks in Florida last week.
Good.
So, but we're very familiar with it and would be happy to assist with any drafting of language in that regard.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any other comments? Mr. Portia, anything else?
For me, would we do this as a stipulation, adding a stipulation?
So
formal
what
motion?
we have right now, Mr. Porche, you have a motion to recommend approval of the draft in front of you now. What, I guess the appropriate thing would be a motion by you and hopefully a second to amend that motion to reduce the height from 25 foot to 10 foot. If that's the motion you would like to make, that would be it.
I would, being, you know, the previous that was submitted was 10, I would be open to discussion after Mr. Chris's comments if, to me, no more than 15, I would feel comfortable with, but I would prefer 10, but I'm open to anyone's comments.
The only comment with that, and I understand,
And when we
is-
conclude discussion, I will make a motion to,
Okay. is for
amend.
the future, as they stated.
Sure.
As technologies change,
Yep.
that's the only thing that, just bear that in mind. When it was written at that, and I,
That's
like
right.
you, was thinking what we were looking at was 10 or 12 feet was
right.
probably the most. That's the only thing I'm thinking about when
And
it comes to that.
if we continually see 15 feet moving forward, or 20, you know, if it, 5 years from now, we're getting more requests for 20, I mean, I'm sure we could, as a staff, or at that point, could look at making that change.
We've done that in the past.
Yep.
And this board and the police jury, you know, you have amended your ordinances to,
Many times.
to do that in, you know, for many years. So, yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
And this is, what you see in front of you represents a good first effort.
That's right.
As one or two of the speakers even alluded to, there are efforts at the state level, possibly in the federal level, that may require changes to this document.
That's right.
However, going forward, this is the best we've got as a good start. I do anticipate changes in the future, but I think you've got a good document in front of you.
Term living document?
Sure.
Yes, it is.
Living and breathing.
I want to say that I'm fine with lowering the height also, but I don't want to make it so restrictive where no one wants to come, to Calcasieu Parish, because it's so restrictive that it would take too much, but they could go somewhere else and they could get 15 feet. And, I just want to be open to that.
Okay.
My question in regards to the height is the screening. How does screening come into play with the 10-foot and the 25-foot height? I'm not familiar with, if it's a 25-foot height, is that screening 30-foot tall? Or, how does that play into that?
Well, yeah, in the ordinance, we have a certain density and vegetation that's sort of spelled out that's required. And we have a certain number of Class A type trees. A Class A type tree is going to get taller than 25 feet. And then there obviously, and these are the minimums now. That's not the companies, they could provide more, but this is the minimum. And then any type of shrubbery or anything like that would be required. So the idea is really for these companies to find properties and tuck these into natural areas, into where you have some natural buffering. You're not going to have that everywhere. I understand that, but the idea is to try to find some of those areas and do it that way instead of having to plant so much. Try to find those natural areas.
I would like to make a motion to amend or to add the stipulation, amend the maximum height from 25 feet to 15 feet.
Second. Motion to amend the motion based on Mr. Porche's comments, second by Mr. Little. Any discussion on that item? If there isn't, all those in favor of that amendment, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
If we want to address anything else they address.
Throw it out. It's worth talking about.
What did you think about the landscape? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Well, and to your question, I think where you're headed is, and what's been alluded to before, again, we can't get a catch-all, one-size-fits-all. Companies can come back to you and say, we can't meet this standard. We need a variance on this, or we need these types of things. I think that's probably the better way to approach these projects.
They have that option.
The only public comment I would like to make is some sort of more objective standard regarding the lighting. Just, it's typical, like the sound is 60 decibels. I understand that, sound, we can meter it, but you can meter light as well. So just moving forward with discussions, maybe even at the police jury level, adding some sort of standard, more objective measurement of the lighting in the agricultural areas, I think is, like you said, I mean, people move out in the country when it's dark. They want it to be dark, not to hinder the rural experience. So, and I can speak to the height, 15 feet. I know what 15 feet is.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know a
right.
national standard other than what my limited research, the dark sky compliant seems to be some sort of standard that's out there, but I'm not educated on it to say, hey, I would like to make a motion that the design and the light fixtures used are dark sky compliant. I just would like, moving forward, for us to consider that. That way it's more objective standards for the lighting.
Sure.
And we do have time. We do have time. This, obviously, this is not the body that makes the final decision on this. Mr. Crane and I could certainly address those concerns with the police jury.
Coach?
I voted on the amendment, but now in the future, with the expansion of technology, and they need 25 people, they have to come back to the board again.
Yes.
If it passes as the maximum height being 15 feet, and somebody comes in and wants to do more than 15 feet, then yes, they would have to come back before the board and ask for a variance from this board. Correct.
Ms. Boucher?
To do a development, they would be before us for approval of the development.
That's correct.
And they could just add it as a variance.
The only districts that they would not be required to come before this board is if they were in heavy industrial.
Right.
Anything above
At
heavy
that point,
industrial.
it's-
But if it's A1 or
Correct.
light industrial, it will come before this board as an exception. That's correct.
Yeah. I have less concerns in an already zoned heavy industrial area.
Well, bear in mind, this is the initial ordinance.
That's right.
So I'm sure it'll be looked at from this point forward and addressed and amended how need be. Any other items of discussion? All those in favor of the amended motion, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is to advise that the police jury took the following action on October 20th, 2022, with reference to the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board from October 18th, 2022 meeting. William Pusall, Common Street, Planning and Zoning recommended approval, police jury approved. Clyde Connor, Broad Street, Planning and Zoning recommended approval, police jury approved. Custom Metal, Leger Road, Planning and Zoning recommended approval, police jury approved. Ryan Romero, Highway 27 South, Planning and Zoning deferred for 30 days, applicant withdrew prior to the Planning and Zoning meeting. Item 10, the next agenda item is to advise that the next regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning meeting will be held Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. That day will also be election of officers. So keep that in mind.
I don't know.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Whitney, second by Ms. Dickerson. The meeting is adjourned.